The story of Strideway, for me, begins when a user reached out in 2024 about, well, this. A litany of not safe for work content, players using names of known drugs, and sex talk. None of this would really have been an issue if it wasn't for the fact that Strideway was a horse role-playing game on Roblox. Yes, that Roblox, the one specifically aimed at kids with a rating of young, not that the CEO seems to give a shit. However, due to real-life situations and me wondering if it was just, a few dumb kids ruining a Discord, I filed it away and moved on. But lo and behold, in June of 2025, more information would come out, again showcasing screenshot after screenshot of not safe for work content. Again, I found myself in a difficult position with a sudden unplanned move. The story could not have landed at a worse time. Again, filed the information and moved on. But then a few months later, the Strideway Discord reached out one more time with brand new screens, and it's at this point that I realized that this was not as simple as a Discord having a few rough folks or perhaps a slip in judgment. This was behavior that was being repeated over and over again. This had become a pattern, a ship that kept veering off course. And now, after all these months, we're finally going to talk about Strideway. This is probably one of the most difficult topics I've ever covered, not because of the subject material, but because a lot of the people part of this drama are actually minors. And this story took a wild turn. I had a villain in my head, but I realized there was more going on than met the eye. I will preface this by saying that I did speak to the owner, and I want to believe that the Discord and mods are trying to do better. I would of course be teasing them, but there is an effort being made, and it should be acknowledged. As such, do not contact anyone, do not join the Discord to solely make trouble, and let's hope that Strideway is changing for the better. Now, why am I covering this if they're changing? Because it's still a public Discord. Because up until last week, there was still some really weird things going on in the server, because we should be holding Discord owners accountable, especially in a community where kids are the main audience. And also, this is a relevant issue. Currently, the question is being raised: should kids even be allowed online before a certain age? And I believe this situation argues against kids connecting in corners with no supervision. Because the horrifying reality of this is that we know from all these articles that predators are a huge problem on Roblox. And in the total of 16,000 users on the Strideway Discord, do you really honestly believe that not a single one of them was a predator looking for a vulnerable kid? It's a terrifying thought. And for most of its life, Strideway gave predators the freedom to make sexual statements in the presence of minors, with very little repercussion. And the responsibility of keeping players safe falls onto the captain of the ship, the owner, Frappy. I spoke to Frappy shortly after I was contacted by the third group of Strideway players. Frappy is the creator and owner of Strideway. She gave me a brief overview of the start of the game, and I quote, "In around 2020, videos on TikTok were popular of people starting their own horse games on Roblox, so I decided I'll try that out. I think I was around 10-11 years old at the time, and mainly wanted to create games because me and my friends at the stables I rode at had this big dream of having our own riding school one day, and I thought I'd bring this vision to life through Roblox." In total, Frappy made 2 horse games on Roblox before Strideway: Lakeshore Stables and Maple Springs Eventing. The work for Strideway would begin in around 2023. The game became quite technical, so Frappy would get help in the form of 2 developers, one of which was called Registered Dev, whom I will be calling Dev from now on. She continues to tell, and I quote, "The game launched in spring of 2024 and the feeling was absolutely overwhelming yet super rewarding. It felt great sharing a project so big with thousands of people. I'm really proud and amazed with how many people the game reached. I've even had people from my school talk about it despite never even mentioning the game in the slightest." End quote. The Discord, though, was created earlier and has now grown to 16,000 users. One can imagine that controlling that many users can be quite difficult. Frappy's main issue, though, was complacency. In her own words, the moderation standards a year ago were unfortunately really badly set and not nearly as consistent and efficient as they are now. Inappropriately named members weren't flagged or escalated for moderation consequences. End quote. What she's talking about is this. Players named themselves after drugs, and they were active members, as we can see here, and not very child-friendly members. and some of them admitted to being minors, including the owner, who puts her own age at around 16 at this time. Now, with all of this in mind, my first reaction was that Frappy was really the issue here. She is the captain of the ship, and she holds a lot of sway. Although young, she didn't understand that this was a space for minors, but it didn't stop her from naming her horse, well, this. In fact, up until last week, this was her role in the Discord. Frappy does say this has been changed though, and I quote, "My horse's nickname stems from advertisements post actually. His show name ended with a word fragment that looks a bit unfortunate when taken out of the whole picture. There was also shortly a fan club role obtainable, which is currently unavailable and not displayed anywhere in the server. Both the role and nickname were created before the entire not safe for work situation was spoken up about. I've went ahead and changed the role name now actually, so thank you for questioning, serving as a reminder, haha," end quote. So she does take full responsibility for it, and it has been changed. I will say, this should never have been allowed, even as a joke. This was being discussed openly in the general chat, and the owner was not only participating, but actively encouraging this. But here we now have a problem. The owner of this Discord is directly encouraging this behavior by engaging in it. As a result, players are now joining in with not safe for work content of their own accord, because not only is it not being moderated, it is being carte blanched by the owner. This clearly created a spiral. Someone was being inappropriate, nothing was done, the owner joined in, which only encouraged it, which meant nothing was done. You can imagine how this would begin to snowball into this becoming the norm on this Discord, which is exactly what happened by Frappy's own admission. Now, I don't think this was malicious. Personally, I felt this was more a sort of conformity in action, when individuals change opinions, behaviors, and even morals to fit in with a group. I'm not making excuses. To be clear, what I'm saying is that we tend to follow trends and behaviors in spaces we want to feel included in. Or more simply put, we are willing to go against our own sound judgment in order to fit in. In the Ash conformity line experiment, for example, this was proven when people were willing to select wrong answers if only to conform to the answer of the group. We are, even as adults, extremely susceptible to our environments and peer pressure, which is why it's so important to develop our critical thinking skills. But the point here is that I believe that kids were joining in on these behaviors because that's what everyone was doing, and because the owner was not really discouraging it, it just became normalized. And this is what I believe we're seeing here. Most of these players would, more than likely, not partake in these behaviors publicly if it wasn't normalized in this space. We do get the bad apples, always, but in the case of this particular Discord, it was so normalized that when people started to push back against the status quo, they in turn received eye rolls and pushback, because it's not a big deal, at least not in this space. Even though they know they are minors, and not in a hypothetical sense. Frappy, the owner, was very aware of it in 2025. To be fair, she is pushing back here against the not safe for work content, but she still chose to call her horse, well, this. Now, with this not safe for work content barrier abolished, we cannot be surprised that other barriers have fallen as well. Racism, of course, quickly follows, and then we have just plain old terrible moderation, which is where the first officer, Astro, comes in. I had my thread that I was pulling, or at least I had my way of thinking what was making sense. If the complacency from the top was causing the community to devolve into inappropriate topics, it should follow that this would extend to the moderators, and I was not disappointed. Astro is a mod on this server, but tends to be very combative when interacting with other players. As an example, a player, will call her Rosemary, posted a horse she created in the game on the Discord. A different player will call her Time, ask Rosemary to not use her club horse, basically her club's mascot, in the Discord. There was clearly some miscommunication between the two, but basically Time just didn't want people to use this design without giving credit, because she'd put a lot of work into it. The argument would come to a conclusion, but Astro would jump in and give her 2 cents to the situation. She started to argue with Time that Time didn't own the design, that she couldn't make demands, that she had no right to tell Rosemary to remove the coat. Time would point out that she had done none of that. She just didn't want people to use her club mascot without giving them credit. Astro would not appreciate the pushback, did not agree, and would warn her and subsequently time her out for 3 days for arguing with a moderator. Frappy would actually agree with Astro in this case, taking her side in the situation. And this leads to a different situation about templates. Now, templates are used for horse breeding, for bios, for academy bios, and they can be a lot of work. As somebody who used to roleplay on forums back in the day, creating your own template is a form of creativity, and it's a lot of work. Frappy would essentially change a rule, saying that you can't post templates you own anymore, you have to make all of them free to use. Basically encouraging a sort of plagiarism. What made it worse is she stated in this announcement that she had a chat with, count it, one staff member and not any of the players, and this sparked a very heated comment, and I quote, "This server is genuinely a shit show. Why are we now essentially promoting plagiarism with this new rule? By putting your own template on this server, you have to allow people to use it without consent? Why was this only discussed between Frapp and one other staff member? Why was this not discussed with all staff, or more importantly, the server members, the people most affected by this? Since I joined the server in 2024, I have seen nothing but censorship, vulgar language, and an insane lack of discipline in regards to staff. I witnessed somebody get bashed by the owner because they wanted to know if a picture was pin-worthy. I know children aren't supposed to have a Discord or be on the server, but big kids being online in spaces is inevitable. Why are children not protected in this server? There are screenshots of staff members telling members who are likely children they're going to have sex with them and shit. The server has literally been shut down because of this, but the staff members who did this were not demoted." Yeah, that is a mouthful, and a lot of what they're saying is true. Frappy would very quickly roll back this change, because of course, this is still creative work, and having your creative work basically plagiarized is extremely frustrating. But it goes to show how easily changes are made at the top without considering the players. And I honestly believe that it was Astro that Frappy had been talking to in this case. Now back to Astro's behavior though. Another example of her unreasonable behavior is when a player was spooked by something Astro posted. Not the image, just the suddenness of it. She was clearly making a joke and being silly, and Astro's reaction? "You're being rude, and I will warn you if you don't stop." If she does warn you though, her warnings are not exactly professional, and speaks to a personal vendetta against anyone who does not listen to her. Here are a few examples. X has been warned. Coming across as rude, and instead of apologizing, dropping it, somehow turned it as to me being rude. Y has been warned. Called me disgusting because I called a panda disgusting. Don't be rude to people, thanks. Z has been warned. Ignoring what a staff has said rule-wise. This was not dragging it on, this was me enforcing a rule and you arguing with that rule. You are not above the rules, do better. And to be clear, this was still happening in November. But now we have a double problem on this Discord if we didn't have enough problems already. We have an owner who doesn't care that her Discord is swamped by not safe for work content. We have users embracing this leniency to be even worse than they normally would be. And we have a moderator who is, for lack of a better term, bullying the player base. Now, Frappy does address this, and I quote, "The moderation standards a year ago were unfortunately really badly set and not nearly as consistent and efficient as they are now. It's better now?" Another issue was letting my group of friends, which was established in summer of 2023, let get away with pretty much anything. That created a really unhealthy dynamic for everyone in the server. I should have realized that the direction the server was heading was completely wrong and stopped it before it did damage to all the members, not just our friend group. The behavior grew this way because the first ever server started out as a friend group. Everyone knew each other, and there were rarely any people out of our friend group who wanted to converse. Now, she does explain that she does have some mental issues. I won't disclose it here, but she does not use that as an excuse. That's the reason why I'm not saying it, just as a reason for her behavior. But unfortunately, this is where it gets a little worse. Introducing the third one, and I'm gonna call him the boson. Dev. Dev helped develop Strideway. According to Frappy, she and him had been friends for a while. He is 17 to 18 years old. But Dev is not an appropriate person to be associating with young girls. His profile includes pretty graphic, not safe for word content. He is overall very aggressive and seems to bully the mods, Astro in particular. He has no qualms calling people slow or stupid. But the main issue is really this image he posted of a boy in underwear holding a body pillow with a caption that reads, "My son, 7, really loves his she-wolf body pillow. He also sent some of the mods nether region pics apparently, though I have no proof of this, so this is pure allegation. But then it gets even worse because in all of this toxicity, and it's a lot of it, there is an accusation being made. According to some of the mods, Dev has threatened Frappy with doxing. He has her information saved and has made it clear that he can release it at any time. These are allegations to be clear, but we do have one post from Dev stating, and I quote, "I never want to see my name in this shitty server ever again. Especially, I don't want to see my face be in any profile picture, banner, or being sent in the server. Thanks." And adding to that, if I wanted to exploit in Strideway, I would make it even worse for the game. End quote. So he has openly threatened the server, and this sort of circles us back to the captain. I asked Frappy about Dev, and she said plainly yes, he does have her information. Yes, he is threatening to release it. She also says she doesn't have a lot of control over him, though it is better at the moment. She also says she has no idea why he threatens her like that, but it's manageable. And I just want to say, Frappy, what are you doing? You have a guy not only insulting your mods, not only posting inappropriate images in the Discord, not only possibly sending nether region pics, but also has your private information saved and keeps threatening to leak it. And you keep wondering why your Discord keeps falling back into disarray, because quite frankly you have a rat gnawing at the hull and the water keeps coming in. You can plug it, but you have to get rid of the rat to keep the ship from veering off course again, or even worse, sinking. I want to know honestly, why are developers in horse games either the absolute saints or the absolute devils? I rarely find one in between. Puppy squeaks making my work impossible. Frappy is heavily responsible for the situation. She will have to make drastic changes to make it right. Although I truly believe that Dev has a lot of responsibility for some of the issues in this server, it feels more like a conglomerate of people that just sort of enjoy the chaos and don't really care for it. If they are to stop this from happening again, then they will have to be vigilant. I still see F-bombs, and up until last week we still had a horse called this. Frappy, in the words of your moderator, do better. Thank you to everyone who reached out for this video, and of course to my Ko-Fi supporters for always being awesome.